So recently, it seems 2 nights ago, there was some drama at Zuccotti Park in New York City with the police cracking down on occupiers. And apparently some girl had a seizure and there's a bunch of drama and it just looks like chaos. Here's some video footage of what was going on.
Surrounded by other people doing nothing all evening.
You actually want us in the street?
Tell your father what he did. Tell your father what he did.
Now, when I come out critical of Occupy, don't take it that I'm against the movement in any way. I'm critical of things that I care about. I'm critical of things that I would love to see succeed, like society, government, the Occupy movement, spirituality, the New Age movement. I'm critical of a lot of these things because I want to strengthen them. We need to have criticism. You need to have dialogue if you want to learn and expand and progress. Progress was never made by someone saying, okay, everything's just fine, let's leave it as it is. Progress was made by people being critical. So that being said, I would like to read some comments which I took screenshots of, which were on the video which you just saw, and which were critical of the Occupy movement. I want to show you guys these screenshots so you see that not everybody is completely on your side. Not everybody is completely there with you. A lot of people are confused and don't understand what you're doing. I think that you're confused and you don't understand what you're doing, Occupy movement. Here are some of the quotes. What specifically are these people trying to change in our society? Here's a valid question. It's understood that you're against the prevailing current of gangsterism. That's understood. I think most of the people in the country can sympathize with that. But it seems to a lot of people like it doesn't have like a firm direction. Like it's just a bunch of angsty hippies and hipsters dancing and screaming and making a ruckus. You guys need to come together and decide some actual goals, some actual changes that you'd like to see. If you can't figure these things out, that you need to have some kind of Congress, you need to have some kind of meetings where you can elect perhaps some kind of representatives to serve as leaders on a rotating basis, or perhaps people who are already leaders of the movement can come together and make decisions with the input of everybody else. But there needs to be some kind of leadership setting some kind of agenda that you can use the power of this movement to follow. Right now, this movement is just a huge mass of potential and a huge mass of undirected force. It's just blind force, and that's very dangerous because, for one, it's just going to create inertia and drag itself down and gradually implode on its own weight if there's no real direction and movement in a direction which is positive. Two, you can get people sneaking in there that have bad ideas. You give a lot of time for people to come in and corrupt it and to screw everything up with propaganda and to confuse. It inflames people's emotions when they get frustrated. They don't know what they're doing. They're just out there because it's trendy and cool and, getting angry, and there's just no direction. So what ends up happening? You end up fighting with the police. You end up shouting and screaming and dancing and making a bunch of chaos. And it really does little other than to raise the awareness that that's what you're doing. All you're doing is getting people to see that that's what you're doing, screaming and protesting, quote-unquote protesting. But protesting doesn't have to require this kind of quote-unquote occupation. You're causing a lot of the community to not identify with the movement. If I could read something from, it is Christian Science Monitor. It says, the eviction of Occupy Wall Street demonstrators in Manhattan was a dramatic turn in the nearly 2-month standoff, inspiring howls of protest from the protesters and their supporters. But New York and other cities have cracked down and appear to have the law and history on their side. A judge upheld New York's decision to clear Zuccotti Park, and even some experts known as supporters of the First Amendment rights say that the judge had it right. See, that's another thing. These kids, they talk about First Amendment, freedom of speech. It has nothing to do with First Amendment. It has everything to do with you camping in a public space, which has never been legal. When has it been legal to camp on the street somewhere or in a park somewhere? It's never been legal. And for some reason you want to upturn all these laws. So if that's what you really want, then you should focus on upturning laws about parks and streets instead of just going there and expecting the status quo to change around you. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it comes off as immature, not thought out, stupid, and people don't vibe with that. They appreciate these kids are doing something, but the intellectual thinking class people, or anybody with a brain who looks at this, is going to be turned off by it. Because it's just so much blindness. I mean, like I said, if you are interested in overturning the park laws, then you should get some people together and work on that. Some lawyers. I'm sure you have plenty of lawyers who are supporting you. If you're interested in overturning police corruption, then you should raise awareness about police corruption. But do you see how you're not picking any of these issues and putting them out there to be worked on in a constructive way? You're just whining and bitching and yelling and making chaos. Don't think that I'm coming down on you, protesters. Like I said before, I'm critical for your benefit. I'm critical because I want to help. I'm critical because I want to see this thing succeed. And right now, it's just looking ridiculous. And if spring is going to come out soon, then, I mean, this is going to add all of this extra weight and force behind a blind movement. And it's very dangerous. How do you know that the movement won't end up being led by people who are working for the other side? I just saw some interesting things with the We Are Change group in New York, which is being headed by somebody whose inner counsel is one of his best friends is a admitted 32nd degree Freemason. So those are the kind of people leading the truth movement. And we don't know what their intentions are. So unless you guys come together and make sure that you have a type of representative administration which is either elected by the people, like I said, in a rotating basis, or it's made up of leaders in the organization, in the community, in the protest people that stand up and want to take the lead. It needs to have some kind of dynamic, you know what I mean? Some kind of dynamic way of centering in on one issue and solving it, or at least showing a list of all the things that need to be solved, and then dividing up the work and saying, okay, how can we do this? You guys have the world's attention right now. You have the world on your side. You need to use it. You need to use the internet. You need to use social networking. You need to get all of people in America involved with this. They will be. They're dying to. But when they look at what's going on in Zuccotti Park and they see these kids, these hipsters and hippies just screaming and acting like yahoos, it's counterproductive. If you want to have a sit-in, have sit-ins. If you want to protest, organize protests. If you want to have an office for an Occupy movement, why don't you rent an office like everybody else, like every other NGO? This is pretty much what it's turned into, as an NGO, a non-governmental organization. So let's make it into an NGO. Let's make it into a real NGO that works for the people. Have offices all around the country, hire people to work in these offices, and solve the problems of the community without the friggin' higher-ups. This is what really needs to happen, and this is what I think is the real power of the Occupy movement and what it could be. Continuing the article, it says the short legal answer here to these situations in New York City and other places today is that there are broad rights to protest, to march, to demonstrate, and be heard, said Floyd Abrams, a prominent First Amendment lawyer. There's no right to occupy a public area on a full-time basis, including housing and facilities and sleeping there. So that's what they say. This is what this person's saying on Christian Science Monitor. Yes, you have every right for your First Amendment. People, your First Amendment is not being encroached upon. Occupy movement. You have no right to set up housing facilities in a public space. You never have had that right. So you guys are in the wrong here. And if you're in the wrong, the weight of your inertia is going to continue to gather and disperse. Or turn into something pointless, like the Tea Party. The energy needs to be used productively, constructively. Let's elect representatives in there who are gonna solve the problems from the horse's mouth. Get them in White House. Let's march and protest and expose these people who are cheating us. Let's expose the lies of the banksters. Let's expose their false practices. Let's expose the corruption in Washington. Let's make it so hot for them that they can't do anything without the whole country knowing exactly what's going on. Education, knowledge, these are what the Occupy movement should be about, and then setting it into action after that. You can't just say, okay, act, go, and solve everything, and we're going to occupy the park. The occupation of the park was an initial first step. It was a feeling. It was a way for all these people who had these similar ideas to stick their feelers out and to set up a foundation, a firm ground for something else to come out of that. But nothing else came out of that. It just turned into this like kind of chic, cool, hipster thing to do, and there's no leaders, and maybe a little guy pops up here and there and does something. But it's just become itself. It's become occupying the park instead of the original idea, which was Occupy Wall Street, which was expose these people. Don't let them continue to operate the way that they're operating. Wall Street, Washington are ongoing, day in, day out. While you guys are screaming and fighting with the cops, Washington is just loving it. The banksters are laughing at you. You're sitting there directing all your rage at the cops when they're just upholding the law, which states that you're not allowed to set up a permanent residential facility in a public place. It doesn't matter if you're allowed to be there 24/7. Setting up housing there is a different legal stature. So I think that it's really time to wake up, kids. It's time to wake up and grow up. We gotta put down our egoism. We gotta put down our little selfish egoism, which wants to go out to Occupy Park and scream and dance and all this. We gotta put this down and instead use our minds, use proper action and proper knowledge against these people. Right now, they're using proper action and knowledge to suppress you. Because you have to understand how the system works, or else how are you going to break it? How are you going to fix it? How are you going to make something new if you don't understand how the system works? And Occupy movement, you're clearly demonstrating that you do not understand how the system works. And besides, if you don't understand how the system works, you don't understand who your enemies are, how are you supposed to fight your enemies if you don't know who your enemies are? And how are you supposed to fight your enemies if you don't know who yourself is? That's a whole nother dimension to this whole thing. I've seen a lot of spiritual teachers and people come out on their Facebook and YouTube and say, occupy yourself, occupy your heart. And I had my title for my Shakti Batsir page when that stuff just happened was, occupy your Atman.
Hello everybody, my name is Richard Embleton and I'm from South Africa. I want to tell you about, with all the upset going on in the world, whether people know about all this uprising, should we say, of humanity, or whether they don't. It's all about, it's the time now for your judgment. You need to trust God. You can't trust the law of man or the law of money to save you. No establishment on this earth of a theme or secret nature based on a law of man delivering something to you is ever going to save you, because everything is to be destroyed by the divine. Obviously those who don't want to believe in God, well, you're out of the way anyway. This is the judgment by the divine for the people who love God to come back. First is the program. The demons need to cause you to rise out, those who love God. You need to shove out so that you feel it's uncomfortable in life, so that you do turn to God. Here are the demons to do it for you.
It doesn't require people to be camping in the streets. We have the internet now. You can use the internet to enlighten people so that they understand how the system works and they no longer consciously support it in ways that they do. I saw a funny picture on Facebook. Someone posted it. Let me put it up on screen here. Hipster1 says, hitting up Starbucks before heading to Occupy Wall Street with other hipster and other hipster. 2 likes. That status is kind of ironic, someone says. Why is that, says the hipster. Because Starbucks is a mega corporation. Oh yeah, true, haha, but it's also really tasty. How are you, by the way? That's exactly the attitude of hipsters. I guarantee that wasn't even a fake Facebook post. I'm sure that was a real thing. You guys are not even aware of the system. If you're going and spending money at Starbucks, bringing your iPods with you, wearing your clothes that were made in a sweatshop in Venezuela somewhere. You come to these Occupy movements decked out in the material of capitalism, decked out in the clothes, the gear, the iPods and everything. You come with all this stuff that was produced by slave labor, and you continue to support things like Starbucks, Walmart, etc. It sends a conflicting message. Then you say you're about peace and about everybody being freed from the banksters, and you swear and curse out the cops like a bunch of animals. The cops are just doing their job. Is this about the cops too, or is it just about the hipsters? I don't know about you guys, but I don't support a movement that doesn't support freeing everybody. Freeing the banksters, freeing the hipsters, freeing the government people. They're all enslaved by this system. They're all suffering because of it. They all might be enjoying, apparently, their apparent power and greed and all this, but I guarantee you that these people, their nights are plagued with nightmares. And their waking days are plagued with anxiety and insecurity and all sorts of false emotions which cover the fact that they're deadly afraid of God, deadly afraid of truth, deadly afraid of what they've done. All this needs to be exposed. All these people need to be brought into the light. We have to not allow them to prey on us like vultures anymore. That's what this movement was about. That's what this movement needs to be about. Exposing the corruption and getting it changed. That's what it's supposed to be about, right? And also, on top of that, you have this seed of a new society. A society which is not based on the control of the resources by the small group of elites. We need a libertarian socialist society. Let me read you this page on anarcho-syndicalism. Anarcho-syndicalism seeks to abolish the wage system, regarding it as wage slavery and state or private ownership of the means of production, which they believe leads to class division. Ralph Chaplin states that the ultimate aim of the general strike as regards to wages is to give each producer the full product of his labor. The demand for better wages only becomes revolutionary when coupled with the demand that exploitation of labor must cease. We demand that the exploitation of labor must cease. Across the world, not just in this third world banana republic called America, but in third world banana republics and first world elite European empires alike all across the globe. Exploitation of the worker must cease. This has been the clarion call of all libertarians and socialists over the last 200 years. But do you know that? No. Because you have not been educated properly on politics, economy, society, religion, etc. They've given you all their education. They've given you all their elite, dumbed down stupefaction so that they can control you. So the first thing you need to do, like I've been saying, in order to escape their clutches is to inform yourself, is to learn, educate yourself as to the real mechanisms of society in place and the real mechanisms which we can put into place to change it, like libertarian socialism or anarcho-syndicalism. Same thing. This basically means democratic capitalism, the ownership of the means by the workers. That means no bosses. There's no boss sitting there exploiting the workers and filling his pockets and the pockets of his board of directors with umpteen millions of bonuses and salary hikes like these crazy people at Goldman Sachs and all this. We've got an economy and a financial system that's gone awry. It is a steaming, powerful train rocketing down a wet, rainy railway in the middle of the night. And this train is the power of the elites to control our monetary system. This is the essence of the Occupy movement. And the essence of that is owning the means of production ourselves. This is called anarchy. And not the anarchy like they want you to think. Anarchy as in no law, no order. Quite the opposite. The order and the law would come straight from the people, as decided by them. There would be law of the land. There would be law of the road. There would be laws for the economy and governing society. But there would be no intelligence service entity like a CIA or a MI6 or an NSA. There would be no elite hedge fund managers sucking the blood of the world dry. There would be no fat cat bosses sucking the blood of the masses who are forced to work as slaves in these overseas factories, or even here in America as slaves in our service industry, which is the only thing that we have left. It's time that we took to the streets, took to the internet, took to the social network, and exposed these fat cats. Exposed the elites. Exposed their corruption. Nobody cares about the elites except these brainwashed patsies on Fox News. The majority of the country can be educated and brought around to this position because the majority of the country are not super elite douchebags. Like you guys say, we are the 99%. Doesn't that mean that the cops are part of the 99% too, or the cops are 98% or we're 98%, the cops are part of the 2%? Which is it? Because I'm seeing a lot of hypocrisy. Now, if I could continue to read some of these quotes, which I saw on the Occupy movement video on Mox News. PPW00 says degenerates, and he's not incorrect. You guys look like a bunch of degenerates. You know, you're out there with the hipster, hippie clothes, screaming and yelling, making a ruckus, causing trouble, no idea what you're doing, just out there because it's the hip chic thing to do, and because it seems to be going in some direction. That's not enough. It doesn't cut it. It's not enough just to say, oh, this movement seems like it's going in the right direction, so I'll come and lend my support to it. There's a disconnect there between what you're trying to do and what is really happening. There needs to be a firm sight, like you're shooting down the barrel of a rifle at your objective. You know your objective? Pow! You're gonna get it. Otherwise, you're just standing there with no gun. And people with guns are shooting you. Or if we could use the terminology of the ancient Vedics, use the bow and arrow to symbolize the projection of the will. There is no bow and arrow projecting anything. There's just a miasmic kind of maybe. And what this degenerates into is social paradigms of hipster coolness and high school and party and club, and that's why it kind of resembles more of like a hipster concert than anything else, than any kind of protest movement, because there's such a lack of principles, education, direction, that it just degenerates into what they are comfortable with, which is hipsterness. So all you have is one big hipster parade, and not everybody's a hipster. Not everybody's going to resonate with that. So what you've done is now turned your movement into a social gathering of hipsters. So hipsters can come and hippies and there's some people who go there who are really interested, but of course they're sidelined because there's no leadership. It's just become this kind of hipster concert. So instead of just being apathetic and allowing the hipster aura to take over everything, individually, bit by bit, all of this corruption, both from within ourselves and from without of the society, needs to be eliminated. We need yoga practice, we need meditation, we need to study Bhagavad Gita, we need to study our spiritual texts, we need to have transmission and the grace of the gurus. We need all of these spiritual things if we're gonna create a movement which is really gonna do anything other than to set up the same type of system that we've seen before. It needs to be based on, at the very least, the basic fundamental tenets of religion which this country was founded upon, that all men are created equal and things like that. We need to go back to this pragmatic religious understanding. It doesn't mean joining one religion or the other. We need to understand who we are, what the world really is. A secular movement of just hippies or hipsters It doesn't have the strength of a movement which is led by a Dr. Martin Luther King, of a movement which is led by a Jesus Christ, of a movement which is led by a Mahatma Gandhi. All these movements succeeded because they were led by the divine spirit, the Holy Spirit. And I can see it in the Occupy camp. There's a lot of kids who are interested in spiritual, pseudo-spiritual things. But that's, again, that's another symptom of the Matrix, is pseudo-spirituality. So much Matrix is going into trying to stop the Matrix. What's going to happen? This is why I'm entirely focused on educating people and getting them out of the Matrix in their consciousness and in their heart. Otherwise, you'll just have this, a big hipster concert, and you'll have more corrupt people who rise through the ranks and take advantage of the others. You'll have new elite classes rising. Look what happened in China. They killed all the elites. They made it into a workers' paradise, quote unquote. But they had no religion, they had no morality, they had nothing. So what happened? Same system, built right back up. Except now you have a state-funded, elitist corporate complex, corporate military complex, which is just pure fascism. So, as you can see, because there is no spirit guiding the communists in China, just like there's no spirit guiding right now the Occupy movement, no real spirit. I mean, there's definitely a stronger of a spiritual potential there than in communist China, because they had just come from a long history of Buddhism. They were done with it. They saw it as a superstition. But here we've come from a long history of atheism for the last 150 years, and Darwinian evolution and all this stuff. So it's time for something new and integral and using quantum physics and consciousness, etc. If we can make the movement injected with these higher principles and understandings of law and dharma based on universal truth, nothing will stop us, my friends. Nothing. And you will recruit only the right people who are meant to make that movement work, and it will change the whole world. Just like Martin Luther King's movement worked and changed the whole world. Let me read another quote here. Personally, I think dancing like an outlaw or an asshole should be outlawed for the good of society, of course. This is by Modern Freestyle 16 hours ago, and the quote right under him, which is by Q Tutoring Helps, says, "Scummy bums." So there's someone who is perceiving your movement as being a bunch of scummy bums, because it's a bunch of hipsters and hippies who are kind of dirty looking, who are just camping out there in the public space. This is completely unnecessary. There's no point in making yourself look like the riffraff of society if you're trying to get the whole of the country behind you. They don't want to support someone who looks like that. Clean yourself up a little bit. Don't look like such ragamuffins. Don't be so nasty in your character too. I see so many people, their energy is so like toxic, so nasty and angry and whiny and complaining and angsty. That also contributes to the idea, the perception that people have of you as being scummy bums, quote unquote. You look not like somebody who people want to support and follow. I mean, hippies, that was a whole generation. We had a whole generation of hippies who were like that. And you see, the other side of the coin, the athletes and the conservative people, they didn't vibe with that. They fought against it, and the country ended up being divided and polarized into this extreme hippie and the extreme anti-hippie. Is that what you want to happen again? Because that's what you're doing. You're doing it all over again, polarizing the country between people on the right who see you as scummy hippies and people on the left who see you as that guy that they just smoked a joint with. It doesn't need to be polarizing. I'm not asking you to change yourself. I'm asking you to look and see if that is really yourself. Is yourself just this cultural icon hippie? Is yourself just these slang words which you've picked up? Is yourself just the egoistic conception of yourself as this cool cat? Is that yourself? Or is yourself something deeper inside which is not affected by what clothes you wear? What social group that you represent? I've never identified with any social group. In high school, I had friends who were the popular preppy kids. Most of my friends were just, kids on the fringes like me. And I had friends who were athletes. I had friends who were in drama and acting. I had friends who were stoners, of course. I had all kinds of friends in high school. I didn't just stick with my little hipster group and act like I'm better than everybody because of what music I listen to and because I'm semi-aware of political stuff, Not that I was even aware of anything political in high school. I was just, screwing around. But it's not necessary to define yourself based on something external. You see this hipster hippiness, this haircut, the dress style, everything, and you define yourself by what you're picking up from the external, from the physical senses. And what that ends up doing is creating a hankara. A hankara, false ego, is in a dualistic paradigm. Your ahankara can only identify with like-minded ahankara. It will never be able to identify with the other side of the aisle. That's why it came up in such a violent way against the police. Because your false ego is so dualistic and so diametrically opposed to theirs. Because it's evolved out of a schism in society in which those type of people, like the conservative police officers, control everything. And so the reaction to that is to become this hipster, hippie guy. But that's not yourself, America. You're not a hipster. You're not a hippie. You're not a scumbag. You're not one of these people who has to dress like this and talk like this way and act like this way. Look deep inside your heart. Now is a time for that, if anything. All of this stuff happening across the world, the revolutions and the occupying, the corruption, everything, it's a time for people to look deep in their heart and ask themselves, who and what am I? Okay, so that's my response to that comment. And let's look at the next one. Perception and judgment. He's talking about the fuck us and we multiply poster that some lady was holding. He says, who other than a worthless evil whore would say that? Now that's kind of harsh of him to say that, but I did copy-paste, I did rather take a screenshot of this, because I think it does demonstrate an immature sentiment, an immature streak in the Occupy movement. It's immature, it's confrontational, it's childish, it's disgusting and perverted in ways that it doesn't need to be. It's just unnecessary to be so crass. It's unnecessary to be so confrontational against the police. Fuck us and we multiply. I mean, it's just disgusting. Who wants to, read that? Really? And next one. Don't need to spend too much time on that one because it's just silly. 777 Carmine 777 says, oh yeah, this is gonna repeal the NDAA. Keep dancing, scratching my head. And that's exactly what I've been saying the whole time. It's so undirected. You have no goals. Even though there are plenty of goals which need to be accomplished, like repealing the NDAA, like he says. Which the National Defense Authorization Act, which basically has turned our country into a martial law governed military dictatorship right under our noses. We need people raising the red flag and shouting to the masses what's happening. We need people who can identify what's happening with their intellect and alert everyone else so that the movement can go in that direction, i.e. leaders. We need leaders in this movement. It's not going anywhere as a leaderless movement. It's really nice sentiment to have it leaderless, but look what that's gotten you. Nothing. And you're going backwards even. Ostracizing the community, putting them out, making them not able to identify with you, doing all these illegal acts which are not even necessary, like camping in the middle of the park and setting up tents and things like that. Completely unnecessary. Like I said earlier, what would be better is to just rent an office for Occupy, accept donations. The people who are really interested in helping can be at the office and do activism. They can go out together, organize protests, marches, fundraisers, make it all transparent, make it all available to see on the internet, make it all so that everybody can interact and be a part of it. Bring more people into the fold on the internet and on social networks, and not just in the immediate area of your little hipster town, New York City. But I know that that's what the hipsters love. They love to have other New Yorkers screaming about how much better that they are than everybody else and how much that they know what's right and we don't. I'm sorry, Occupy, I had to throw that one in there. You're acting a little bit cocky, and you have nothing to back it up. You know, you're like one of those kids that talks all tough and talks a good game and comes out, you know, cock of the walk, muscles and chest out, and then they get laid out in the first friggin' round, knockout, boom, by the better prepared, worked out, trained boxer. That's exactly what you're like, Occupy. You need to do your training. You need to educate yourselves into the system that you're playing into, how to change it, what needs to happen to change it, making education to alert other people, to change the minds of these libertarian Ron Paul followers who think that everything will just solve itself as soon as we put everything on the gold standard, even though these elite people are the ones that own all the gold. What Ron Paul supporters really want is communism. They don't say it, but that's what they really want. They want libertarian socialism, not straight communism. They want libertarian socialism, and that's what libertarianism was originally founded as, was a libertarian socialism, aka the anarchy that I described earlier, the anarcho-syndicalism, was the origin of this libertarian thought that's so popular right now. So if you can alert people and wake up people to that fact also, hey, you got a whole nother plethora of group, you have a whole nother subgroup on your side of Ron Paul supporters. Show them that, look, we're libertarians also. We want the people to be forefront, and we want the elites to fuck off. We want the people to not be controlled by these scams and these monetary pyramid schemes and these hedge funds, all this crap. There's so much corruption that needs to be exposed and so much educating that needs to be done. But it'll never happen until you people wake up and see that there are these issues that need to be solved. Not just screaming and partying and dancing. I think that's good for that quote. Next screenshot is from Final NWO Fantasy 15 hours ago. And he says, "Goddamn Occupy movement never going to achieve economic freedom this way." He's absolutely right. When did anybody ever achieve economic freedom by screaming and dancing and acting like hippies? Is it so childish? It's so utterly childish what's happening. It needs to have more direction. That's what everybody here is saying on these comments. It needs to have more direction. And direction comes from leadership. Leadership of people who know what they're doing. Leadership of people who are aware of the system and the dialectics at play. Next comment says, "Useful idiots." And under that it says, and this comment got 3 thumbs up. "Dancing around the park invites the police and does not accomplish anything. Why don't you all march to the White House and end the feds so we can put an end to the real tyrants?" See, here's a suggestion of something constructive. Ending the Fed. Boycott the Federal Reserve. Refuse to participate in their wage slavery. refuse to participate with in their Federal Reserve note system. Make people aware of how that they are controlled and enslaved by this monetary system. Show them the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill and how it relates to the Masons. Wake people up. Protest the right places. Protest the Federal Reserve. Protest the G8 summit. Protest, Goldman Sachs. Protest these people. And you can also think of constructive activism in certain ways that you can even do more than protest. Educating the people is the one that I keep focusing on, which is so important. The activism of raising awareness. Hand out leaflets, make websites, make videos, get everybody involved, do a forum like where everybody can come and post ideas and talk about it. There needs to be more interaction with the public and more direct action to stop the corrupt arms of this elite octopus which is controlling us with its slimy tentacles. All the tentacles of the octopus need to be identified and action must be taken to counteract it in whatever way necessary. Use your imagination. You guys are supposed to be the artists, and the hippies and the hipsters are supposed to be like the artistic, imaginative people. Or is that just a stereotype that you guys want us to believe because you all go to art school? I don't see any imagination or creativity here. I mean, it was creative in the first place to go and get together and occupy Wall Street. That was amazingly creative. And then after that, I really haven't seen any creative idea at all. Continuing to the next comment, Alexander E. Bett says, "These animals do not care to understand what the problem is." These animals. See, he calls you animals. You're acting like animals, so you look like a big herd of hipster animals. These animals do not care or to understand what the problem is. See, that's the thing. I really hope that that's not true. I really hope that you guys do care to understand what the problem is. But the way that it is looking, it doesn't seem like you care to understand what the problem is. You just want to go out because it's a hipster thing to do. It's cool, chic. Make it seem like you're doing something by being out there standing in your clothes that were made in a Chinese sweatshop, talking on your iPad that was made in a Chinese sweatshop, sipping your latte from Starbucks, listening to MTV and shit, listening to these hipster, cool bands that are all full of angst and stupidity. I really hope you do care to understand what the problem is, and that being drawn to that Occupy movement is something which goes beyond and which is deeper than that brain of yours, which can only see in terms of the hipsterness. I hope that you're pulled in by something in your heart which yearns to actually understand what's going on, which yearns to actually know yourself and to know the universe. I hope that it did come from that place originally, and that something can happen to make you actually want to understand the system, want to understand politics and economics, and not just scream and yell, because that's all it's turned into, just people screaming and yelling. There's very little thought which is going into any of the actions on Occupy. It's very much base, animalistic stuff. You can feel it in the crowd. You can feel the base egoism. You can feel the base animalistic emotions, feelings, herd think. It reminds me just of like a big high school auditorium, or high school, the try that they have at a high school. They used to call our things the try. It's like this, or the quad, this big open area where all the kids would get together and assemble at lunch and, be kids and hipsters. It reminds me entirely of that, and it has nothing, there's nothing else to it but that. Just a kind of high school auditorium quad area where a bunch of hipsters are getting together to drink coffee and spend their time. Guys, wake up. Look what's happening while you guys are out there being absorbed in fighting the police, or being absorbed in looking like a hipster, being absorbed in the herd mentality and the herd activity and the herd movements of Occupy, being absorbed in that. Doesn't require much thought. What requires thought is to say, okay, this is going nowhere. How do we make it go somewhere? How do we identify our goals? How do we educate people to see our goals? How do we educate myself to see the goals of the movement? The next quote, final NWO fantasy. I used to think I was a hippie until I saw the Occupy movement. For real. I mean, these people are super hippies. And as Eric Cartman said, which is my next quote, fucking hippies. They say they want to change the world, but all they do is smoke pot and smell bad. Fucking hippies, they say they want to change the world, but all they do is smoke pot and smell bad. Eric Cartman. And on that note, I think I will end this 50-minute video. Thank you for watching.